Have you ever considered the long-term sustainability of short-term rentals? It's a question that's increasingly taking center stage as more and more people hop on the short-term rental bandwagon. Short-term rentals have seen a meteoric rise in popularity over the past decade. What once was a niche market is now a booming industry, transforming the way we perceive travel and accommodation. But as we revel in the convenience and flexibility these rentals offer, it's important to pause and ponder their sustainability. The sustainability of short-term rentals is a multifaceted issue, encompassing economic, social, and environmental implications. Economically, while there's no denying the profitability of short-term rentals for property owners, the question remains whether this model is sustainable in the long run. Will the market eventually become oversaturated, and what happens when the demand fluctuates? Socially, short-term rentals have stirred up controversy in many communities. While they can contribute to local economies by attracting tourists, they can also lead to increased rent prices and a shortage of long-term housing for residents. Is it fair to prioritize short-term profits over the well-being of the local community? And then there's the environmental aspect. Short-term rentals often result in higher energy consumption due to frequent turnovers and less efficient use of space. Moreover, the constant influx of tourists can put a strain on local resources and infrastructure. So, are short-term rentals really as green as we think? These are not easy questions to answer, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. But as we move forward, it's crucial that we examine these issues critically and strive for a more sustainable approach. Let's delve deeper into the issues surrounding short-term rentals, shall we? Because understanding the sustainability question is the first step towards a more sustainable future. And that's a journey worth embarking on. Consider the case of a popular vacation destination overrun by short-term rentals. Let's travel in our minds to a picturesque coastal town, once a haven for locals, now a hotbed for holiday homes and Airbnb listings. This seemingly idyllic scenario hides a troubling reality, a reality that gives us an insight into the negative impacts of short-term rentals on local communities. As property owners realized the lucrative potential of short-term rentals, a surge in property prices occurred. The once affordable houses and apartments became out of reach for the locals. This shift in the market led to a severe housing crisis, with locals struggling to find affordable places to live in their own town. The rising property prices also led to an exodus of long-term residents. These residents, who had once formed the backbone of the community, were replaced by transient tourists. The community cohesion, the sense of shared identity and belonging, started to fade. The town's unique cultural identity, built over generations, was replaced by a homogenized tourist experience. Moreover, the influx of tourists also led to other problems. Noise pollution increased, the tranquility of the town was disrupted, and the local infrastructure strained under the weight of the increased population. The town's resources were stretched thin, affecting the quality of life for the remaining residents. The effect on local businesses was a double-edged sword. While some businesses flourished due to increased tourism, others struggled. The local bakery, the corner grocery store, the family-run restaurant, they all found it hard to survive in the new landscape. The heart of the town, its local businesses, faced an uncertain future. This case study of a picturesque coastal town overrun by short-term rentals is not an isolated incident. It's a story repeated in cities and regions across the world. It's a story that paints a grim picture of the potential pitfalls of a market dominated by short-term rentals. It's a story that compels us to question the sustainability of short-term rentals and to consider their impact on our communities, our homes, and our lives. But what about the environment? Does the short-term rental industry take a toll on our planet? Indeed, it does. The rise of short-term rentals has led to an uptick in environmental issues, particularly in terms of waste and energy consumption. Let's delve into these problems a little further. When we talk about waste in the context of short-term rentals, we're not just referring to the occasional soda can left behind by a forgetful tenant. It's a much bigger issue than that. Short-term rentals, by their very nature, encourage a transient lifestyle. This often leads to increased waste generation, as guests are less likely to recycle or compost, compared to long-term residents who have a vested interest in their local community. Then there's the issue of energy consumption. Short-term rentals, particularly those in tourist hotspots, are often occupied year-round. This means they're consuming energy around the clock, whether it's for heating, cooling, or just keeping the lights on. In contrast, long-term residences are more likely to have periods of vacancy, reducing energy usage. Furthermore, the constant turnover of guests in short-term rentals leads to more frequent cleaning, laundry, and maintenance operations. All these activities consume a significant amount of water and energy, contributing to the overall environmental footprint of the industry. But it's not just about the direct impact. The growth of short-term rentals can also lead to indirect environmental harm. For instance, the increased demand for these rentals can drive up property prices, forcing locals to move further away and thus increasing their commuting distances and carbon footprints. So you see, the environmental implications of short-term rentals extend far beyond a single property. They ripple out, affecting local communities and the wider environment. It's a domino effect of sorts where one problem leads to another, contributing to the overall unsustainability of the short-term rental model. Clearly, the environmental consequences of short-term rentals are far from negligible. Beyond the environment, what are the social ramifications of short-term rentals? This question takes us into the heart of our communities, where the impacts are often deeply personal and far-reaching. Let's start with the disruption of local communities. Imagine living in a peaceful neighborhood where you know everyone and everyone knows you. Suddenly, a home on your block becomes a short-term rental. The steady stream of strangers, coming and going at all hours, can shatter the tranquility of your neighborhood. The sense of community, once nurtured by long-term residents, could be eroded in the blink of an eye. That's not all. The constant turnover of guests could also lead to a rise in crime rates. It's not to say that all short-term renters are criminals, far from it. However, the lack of oversight and regulation can create opportunities for those with ill intentions. We've seen stories in the news, from property damages to more serious offences, all linked to short-term rentals. Moreover, these rentals can exacerbate housing affordability issues. As more and more properties are converted into short-term rentals, the pool of available housing for long-term residents shrinks. This can drive up rental prices, pushing locals out of their own communities. It's a kind of gentrification, but one driven not by redevelopment, but by the transient nature of short-term rentals. Then there's the matter of social equity. Short-term rentals, with their potential for high profits, tend to attract property owners with means. This can create a wealth gap where the rich get richer at the expense of the less well-off, who are priced out of their neighborhoods. So we see that the social implications of short-term rentals are far from trivial. They affect the very fabric of our communities, disrupting social cohesion, increasing crime rates, exacerbating housing affordability issues, and widening social equity gaps. Without doubt, the social costs of short-term rentals are considerable. And as we delve further into this topic, we'll find that these costs are just one part of a much larger, more complex picture. Finally, let's explore the economic downside of short-term rentals. These rentals, while profitable in the short run, can have long-term drawbacks that affect not just homeowners but entire communities and economies. Let's start with market saturation. It's a basic principle of economics that an oversupply of anything can decrease its value. In cities around the globe, a surplus of short-term rentals has led to a similar effect. With so many options available, property owners often have to slash their prices to stay competitive. This price drop can lead to decreased revenue, which in turn can make it harder for homeowners to maintain their properties or pay their mortgages. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. An oversaturated market can also discourage new entrants. Why invest in a property for short-term rental if the market is already flooded with options? This can lead to stagnation and a lack of innovation, which is never good for any economy. Now let's talk about long-term housing availability. In areas with a high concentration of short-term rentals, the availability of long-term housing can decrease dramatically. This is because property owners often find it more profitable to rent their properties on a short-term basis rather than long-term. This trend can drive up the cost of long-term rentals and make it harder for people to find affordable housing. In extreme cases, it can even contribute to housing shortages and homelessness. In addition, the shift from long-term to short-term rentals can disrupt local economies. It can lead to job losses in industries that depend on long-term residents, such as schools, healthcare facilities, and local businesses. And it can put a strain on public services as short-term renters are less likely to contribute to the local tax base. In light of these issues, one has to question, is the short-term rental model truly sustainable? As we have seen, the sustainability of short-term rentals is a complex issue. They seem like a win-win situation at first glance, but when we delve deeper, a different picture emerges. The environmental impact is considerable. With the frequent turnover of guests, the carbon footprint increases significantly. From the endless washing of linens to the increased use of utilities, it's a heavy burden on our planet. Then there's the social aspect. Communities are disrupted with homes turned into transient accommodations. The sense of neighborhood is lost, replaced by a revolving door of strangers. And let's not forget the economic downside. Local economies suffer as money is funneled away from traditional businesses and into the pockets of big rental platforms. In conclusion, the short-term rental industry has far-reaching consequences that are often overlooked. It's clear that the future of short-term rentals is uncertain, and it's time we all took a closer look at this industry.